Now this week with our topping tail on the S&P weekly time frame, essentially a gravestone doji. It needs to be confirmed and then get a follow through. But we are seeing signs of distribution with that. Again, as we've seen other turning points here in 2022, January 2022, we saw a couple of points of distribution that led to the reversal. Some were just individual, some were multiple. Last one we got was at the March high, then we turned back up here shortly after the bottom. Now we're seeing distribution. This is showing that distribution is starting to take place. Sometimes you hang around the high for a little while, other times you get it. Here we've hung around the high for 2 weeks. Our second week now we're seeing the evidence of distribution over the last 2 weeks. P weekly chart here. Again, that's likely going to lead to a reversal with the divergences that are forming in the weekly time frame. A good shot. If the topping tail is confirmed next week, that reversal started this week and the previous week with the topping tails that we got on both the S&P and NASDAQ. We're seeing the same exact thing with the NASDAQ 100 weekly chart. Now again, sometimes you get multiple signals here, or like down here. Other times you just get one, or one. Over here had a couple of them with the diversions over here. Again, over here had a few. Here we're getting, with the topping tails, we're getting on the NASDAQ. We had a gravestone doji last week. We got a doji spinning top-looking candlestick this week. Distribution bars, topping tails, and it's showing that distribution is taking place there, and a possible reversal could be starting. That's what it's warning about. Warning of a possible pullback or reversal, warning that distribution is taking place. That's what the red arrows are warning at these peaks that you're seeing right here. That's what the green arrows are warning, that accumulation is taking place. So we're now getting signs with the back-to-back reversal topping tails. We're getting signs of distribution on both NASDAQ and S&P 500. The critical mass cloud for the S&P 500, we are getting signs of distribution here as well. We had distribution signs at the peak a week and a half ago, and now on Friday we exceeded that peak and we formed a little divergence on the RSI. We're getting more signs of distribution right here. This is telling us that institutions are selling into the rally, just like over here and over here and over on here. And again, they're getting setting up for a pullback or setting up for a reversal. These were pullbacks over here. This led to a reversal. Short term, this led to a reversal. This led to a pullback here. Down here led to a reversal and a buy signal. Long term, it's been buy, sell, buy. We don't have a sell signal yet, but look at right here. The critical mass line in the critical mass cloud is flatlined. We're making new highs, and then we pull back, and then we made some more new highs. So you're forming a divergence on indicators, but we're not going higher on critical mass. It's showing flatline like it did over here as we were forming the top. Over here when we were going sideways, or right here, again, pulling back, it's telling us we're likely going to see a pullback or a reversal. I think you got a pretty good shot. You'll get a reversal with those negative divergences in the weekly time frame on the RSI and the Awesome Oscillator and the MACD. Signs of distribution now on the S&P 500 here with the critical mass cloud. Again, my signals remain bullish for the trend, but I'm seeing momentum signals now begin to turn. I've designed this indicator to look at both momentum and the trend. Blue and red lines with momentum, and then the green and red with the trend. And then down here, the oscillator goes positive. When the trend is positive, it goes negative when it starts to turn. And then when it goes sideways, it goes back and forth. But again, does a really good job. We completed divergence on Friday, and momentum flipped on Friday. If I bring it up close here, you can see that. We got the topping tail, and we saw momentum flip right there. Now over here it flipped, and we pulled back. Over here it flipped, and we got a bigger sell-off. And again, you still you turned down, you went back up, and you kind of hovered around a little while, but then you got the bigger sell-off there in April on into support levels where we bounced. We talked about that at the time. So again, right here, I'm seeing momentum flip, and I'm seeing momentum flip on a lot of signals, but we could be starting a reversal. Wait, the back-to-back reversal bars on the weekly chart with negative divergences in place. And that's true for NASDAQ. It went slightly higher than the previous peak right over here, 2 weeks ago. We went slightly higher and then completed a divergence, a topping tail, and that gave us a topping tail in the weekly time frame. I told you earlier in the week to be watching to see if we get back-to-back reversal bars in the weekly time frame. We did, and in doing so, we're seeing evidence of distribution and momentum shifting. Now again, got to drop down here and flip the trend and go negative to validate this. We'll see if that happens. NASDAQ daily chart here, again, momentum flipping. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the information, you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. Know that you want this information. Take a moment to follow the link below. It'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want. The money on YouTube channels that is made is through sponsorships. I don't have any sponsors. I turned all those offers down because I don't want to sell you things or send you to websites that want to sell you things. That's that you support the channel. I need to hear from you. If you could take a moment to step up to the plate and help out, I would really, really appreciate that. Just follow the link below. I thank you for your consideration for that. Again, I talked to you about, again, closing above the upper Bollinger Band, moving up to the upper channel on the weekly chart, or even overthrowing it. We overthrew it. We redefined it. We closed below that upper band, and we turned down, and I told you we could be headed towards this upper band right here, but not go above it. That is what has happened. Have this rising wedge here, a much larger rising wedge in the weekly time frame. I think you've completed now a 5-leg push higher in all likelihood. About the upper channel line being reached, that's still a possibility, but I told you I think that we're probably going to see a level below the upper band, much like what we had over here. I talked about that, and we got that there on Friday with the topping tail. The move could be done with our divergence now completed on the RSI in the daily time frame, and the MACD rolling over there Friday on the S&P 500. We're likely headed down to this trend line right here, which is a possible neckline, the 4900 area, for a possible head and shoulders pattern. If we see that happen and we peak and we get a sell-off, we could see a rebound here going into probably to the late July meeting with the Fed, and then rebounding back up towards this 52 or 5300 area. I already talked to you about the 9-count sell signal that we got 2 weeks ago. I told you that 9-count can mark a peak, or we can go a little higher. Well, we went a few points higher on NASDAQ. Got a topping tail just below. Again, we closed below our upper Bollinger Band, and then we came back and we got a lower high below it, which again could mark the turn now with the diversions completing on indicators like the RSI in the daily time frame. Allow the weekly divergences to play out. But this is a reversal pattern. Sometimes you go a little higher than the 9-count. Sometimes you turn immediately. Here went just a little tiny bit higher so far. We'll see if we start the reversal with our topping tail there from Friday. But what's going on is you're getting the 9-9 here in the daily, getting a 9-count, a 13-9 completing in the weekly. S&P is doing the exact same thing. S&P got a 9-count here. Here we got a 9-count. It was a not a perfected signal because bar 7 was the high of the count. We went a little bit higher and again pulled back and then went sideways, and we formed this little miniature double top, very similar to what we had back over here. You have a rising wedge that's probably going to try to break down at some point next week. Again, I told you I thought we'd rally to the upper Bollinger Band towards it. Done that, and we've turned off of the trend line right here didn't draw that very straight, from the peak over here and the peak over here. Now, NASDAQ and S&P are forming 9 counts in their weekly time frames, but we do have 9-9 reversal patterns. There's no 9 with the P above this because, again, bar 7 was the high of the count, went a little bit higher, and again, it's likely now going to play out. S&P got the back-to-back bearish candlesticks. We got a topping tail, a little better seen with the shooting star on the SPY chart. Got a gravestone doji this past week right here, and we pushed back below the upper Bollinger Band here in the weekly time frame. We had a 13 over here. We've gone higher. Now we got an 8 of a 9 bar. The 8 or 9 could be the high of the count. If the gravestone doji is the high of the count, you'll have a perfected sell signal, or if the 9 bar is the high of the count, we do have topping tails here again, so we could see a reversal with this doji, gravestone doji, again to head back towards this level at 4,900 for a head and shoulders formation. But you have a 13 followed by a 9 which is a major reversal pattern here in the weekly time frame, setting up 8 or 9, the 8 or 9 bar. This bar, this weekly bar was bar 8. Next week will be bar 9. That could be a reversal. Monthly time frame, we got bar 13. Last month, we've gone a little bit higher than bar 13. Sometimes you top without those bars. Other times, a little bit higher. Possible we peak with bar 8 or 9. This is the S&P weekly chart here. Bar 8 this week with our gravestone doji. Again, back-to-back reversal bars with NASDAQ weekly chart. We get the gravestone doji last week. This week we get a spinning top or doji-looking candlestick. Again, push back below these upper Bollinger Bands. Bar 8 could be the high of the count. Here we have a 13 followed by a 9. You'll have double sequence count sell signal. A 13 followed by a 9 on both the S&P and the weekly time frame is a double sequence count sell signal. Reversal pattern. The 9 over here gave us the 8% drop. This 13-9 will likely produce the reversal and maybe set up a head and shoulders formation. Very possible that the 8 bar, when we went higher, that the 8 bar is the top of the count. Very possible with our back-to-back reversal bars if we close below next week, below this bar. As long as you don't close below the bar from 4 weeks ago, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you don't close below this level, you can confirm this candlestick and still have a perfected 9-count sell signal in the weekly time frame and a double sequence count sell signal in both on both the S&P and NASDAQ with 13 followed by a 9, a double sequence count sell signal. Call it that because the sequence counts are getting back-to-back reversal candles, 13 and then a 9, reinforcing it. I wanted to make you aware of this, as we've already had those 9-9 sell signals in the daily time frame. Now you're getting double sequence count sell signals setting up here, and bar 8 very well could have been the high of the count here for NASDAQ and the S&P 500. Are you picking up what I'm throwing down? I told you I thought we'd push higher on these weekly charts to form a divergence or a confirmation of a lower high. We got the divergence scenario. If that happened, we go up to those trend lines or possibly overthrow them. That happened. We're setting up these full sequence count sell signals, a 13 followed by a 9. Are reversal patterns. Forming these massive negative divergences here in the weekly time frame that, again, with our back-to-back topping tails for 2 weeks straight, the S&P and NASDAQ, again, it's likely going to lead to a reversal. As I've been pointing out, we have a trend line in the daily time frame. Here it is in the weekly time frame that is forming a very large rising wedge in the weekly time frame as we push into this upper channel and just slightly overthrow it. So again, our topping tail this week in the form of the gravestone doji, back-to-back reversal bars, back-to-back topping tails. As I've talked about, we had a shooting star the previous week, sloppy here on the S&P, but you can see it really very nicely on the PY weekly chart, which I talked about in my last update. I'll link that video at the end of this one. Earlier in the week, we were seeing momentum signals begin to weaken on the NASDAQ here on the daily chart, and you can see that the momentum line flipped to bearish, and we got the red arrow there, and then it flipped right back to bullish, and you got the blue arrow, and it flipped right back to bullish. And then with Friday, it flipped right back to bearish again. Momentum line red going flatlined. But we are seeing warning signals. We're seeing some sell signals. We're seeing momentum line flip back to bearish. We're seeing the little X, and circle is suggesting a top, at least a short-term top, push down, and it's suggesting we could see a pullback or reversal. Like we did over here, we had a peak and then we turned down a little bit and we started to see these sell signals show up, warning of a top here. Over here, same thing, warning of some bottom. Top was followed by the trend turning bearish, and the background is the trend turning bearish. Bullish signals were followed, and the bottom signal here was followed by the bullish. Here, we just had a pullback on NASDAQ, and then we saw the signals turn back to bullish with the momentum line. So here we are. We see some warning signs of distribution indicators, and we're seeing a shift now in momentum signals for the NASDAQ, and starting now to see it on the S&P with Friday's topping tail on NASDAQ and the S&P. I formed a little divergence on indicators, so we'll be watching, does momentum go negative? And we saw things turn positive, get back above this line representing the trend. Momentum went positive. Over here, we were forming a divergence and went negative with the divergence and stayed there, eventually selling off. So we are clearly seeing signs of a shift in momentum. The trend is still bullish, but we're getting warning signs of a sell signal that could, again, just mean a short-term pullback or a reversal. We are at a major resistance on the NASDAQ and S&P 500, as I've been talking about. Momentum shifting here. Now, the S&P 500 did trigger a sell signal, could lead to a pullback or reversal. The momentum line did not shift here on the S&P 500. We got multiple sell signals on SPY, which I'll show you in a second, and the momentum line did shift. We got a little T for a top there for short-term momentum on the SPY daily chart. Let me show you that. So again, little discrepancy between the two, and that could be a result of the dividend. SPY tracks the S&P 500, but time to time there are slight discrepancies. Sometimes that is due to the dividend. Nevertheless, I digress. I think we could see a turn here with the divergence having formed. And again, if we go into the negative region next week and we come down, we start taking out the lower boundary of the cloud and dropping below this line, which represents the trend, then again we could see move begin back down to the lows over here again, possibly a very large head and shoulders top down towards this 4,900 area. Now the signals over here that were followed by, and again we got a peak over here, and then we went 3 points higher, and we got another sell signal over here, and then we got a topping signal, and eventually that shifted the trend, and it led to this sell-off back to the 100 period moving average. We saw buy signals there, and the momentum line turned bullish, and it remained bullish up until we got up in here, and then we saw the pullback, and then it flipped back to bullish. So I'll be watching. Do the signals begin to play out? I'll be looking. I got the bars here reflecting momentum, okay? And we started to see momentum flip over here. The bars turned red. When the momentum started flipping back to bullish, you see these little bullish buy signals. This bar started flipping back to green, tried to flip back to red here, fought it out with the bulls and bears with momentum signals here, but the momentum line remained bullish, and eventually we got back above this line right here and got another bullish signal there. So here I'll be watching, do the bars flip back to red next week with Powell or on FOMC minutes? We have kind of a short trading week with the Independence Day holiday, the 4th of July. So again, there could be manipulation. Just as you're going to see it manipulated downward, lighter volume. We have begun to see distribution take place over the last 2 weeks. The rallies are starting to be sold, as we can clearly see in the weekly time frame and the distribution signals that I'm showing you. I'll be watching to see, do we get red bars? Do we get the momentum line flipping there on Monday or Tuesday? Just as you'll see it, we already have it on the SPY daily chart. So keep this in mind right here. You're going to see more sell signals on SPY with mild discrepancies between the two, but this is the S&P cash right here. Now this is the S&P 500 ETF SPY in the daily time frame. We turned down here, we got a sell signal, back up, and got another one. We did see the momentum line flip to red here. A little hard to see, but on Friday it did flip to red. We did get a little topping tail, or a topping signal here. So what this is telling us is we're either going sideways or we're now starting to go down. That's what it's telling us. You can get these signals and go sideways. Over here we got it, and we formed a little top and sold off. Here we got bottoming signals and formed a bottom and rallied. Other times you get topping signals and it just gives you a pullback or momentum. Here we're getting sell signals, so you've got a possible reversal, and the momentum line turned to bearish on SPY in the daily time frame on Friday. We didn't get it on the S&P 500 cash, but we got it on SPY, and we already have it on NASDAQ and QQQ. Pretty good chance S&P is going to try to get it Monday or maybe Tuesday with Powell's speech. Watching to see if we start selling off on Monday or Tuesday, and if we do we start flipping the trend signals to bearish? But we're starting to see evidence of a possible pullback or reversal. I think you got a really good shot of a reversal based on the negative divergences in the weekly time frame. You can see those in the video that I made earlier this week. Talk about them constantly because I believe they're going to produce a reversal. A rally up the upper channel liner to overthrow it to complete those divergences. We've now seen that happen. So more bearish signals here than on the S&P cash. S&P did start getting a sell signal. We'll see if momentum flips. We'll see if we start getting more bearish signals on the S&P 500. And again, there's slight discrepancies from time to time. There is with the S&P and futures. With the S&P 500 futures, also got a topping tail. It was a couple points lower than the previous peak where S&P moved higher because, again, the contract rolled over. They roll over every quarter, and here momentum flipped on Friday, getting a topping tail and a shooting star candlestick. We'll see if it's confirmed Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to see if the background here for the S&P reflecting the trend flips back to bearish. I'll be watching to see if the S&P or sell signals, but I am starting to see signs of distribution, and I am starting to see signs of momentum flipping on the S&P 500, and a lot of signals are flipping on the NASDAQ. Momentum is flipping. Trend signals are still bullish, but momentum signals have now flipped many indicators this week, past trading week. Now again, just quickly here, if we start seeing other signs of weakness with the S&P here, momentum is not flipped yet either. We'll see if that happens early on next week before the Independence Day holiday. And then again, if we do start to see a reversal, we'll need to see the trend signals taken out, and we'll need to see the balance of power go into the negative region. Here, when we saw things go back in a positive, get above that line right there reflecting the trend, we saw the balance of power go positive, and we also got the bullish flip of the trend with the cloud turning back from red to green. And this line represents the trend. This line represents the momentum. So again, I'll be watching that. Momentum signals are flipping. Some haven't yet, but we're getting a boatload of them flipping on the NASDAQ. Again, the bars here represent the trend. Again, we started seeing warning signs with the orange bars. It went to red. You don't always get that. Here we got orange and red bars, flip back to green. We've been with green bars ever since, reflecting the trend. If it starts going orange or red, then again, warning that we're at risk of changing the trend. The bars I showed you were momentum. These bars are trend. I went through and I talked about in the last update the back-to-back bearish candlesticks in the weekly time frame. You can see it, go watch it. We are seeing distribution this past week that we just completed and the week before that. We are seeing topping tails. We are seeing signs of distribution. Friday we got the MACD rollover and the RSI ticked down, completing the diversions. We went higher. I told you I was looking for a divergence to complete. Rather than going to this trend line right here, we went to the trend line right here, going back to the March peak right here, connect that peak right there to the trend line, to this peak right here, you get a trend line, and we went right up to that trend line right here. We're getting something that looks very similar to what happened here in March and also back in July. Both of them put in a peak, we sold off, we went right back up to test the high, and then we turned down. In both of those cases here in March, back with the July sell-off last July, and again, you're getting a very similar setup right here where we put in a peak here last week, but the week before that on Thursday came down, got the inverted hammer at the 10 period there on Monday, and then began to rebound off the 10 period moving average and went right up to that trend line right there. So again, signs of distribution now. I'm seeing momentum shift now. Talked about that briefly in my last update. Told you to watch this update. I'll be able to show you charts that I didn't have time to show you in the last one. But again, this is a topping tail. You took out the 10 period. We could rebound back up a little bit, but there's a very good chance we have a top in now, especially not only completing the diversions here in the MACD rolling over, getting those back-to-back bearish candlesticks in the weekly time frame, and we're seeing momentum shift on some of the indicators now for S&P and NASDAQ, and I've been warning about NASDAQ, having already got it, seeing it on the S&P 500, and we had already had it a little bit there on SPY, which I'll show you those charts. Again, I think that we're going to have the short trading week next week with Independence Day. Powell speaking, you're going to have FOMC minutes, and we could confirm, even if we try to bounce off this trend line right here, we could confirm with Powell or with the FOMC minutes, or maybe both, we can confirm the topping tail if we stop making new highs and start a reversal, and confirm by the end of next week, by the end of this, I should say, short trading week, we can confirm the bearish back-to-back candlesticks in the weekly time frame. We have it both on the S&P and on the NASDAQ. So again, just wanted to show you this trend line that we turned off of right here. If we attempt a recovery, some kind of recovery on Monday, or sell off, and if we sell off, if we attempt to rebound with Powell or the FOMC minutes, or we rally ahead of them. So I'm going to be watching, did we sell off with Powell? We rallied with the PCE inflation data, but we got a top and a reversal bar with the PCE, which is, again, it happens once in a while. Sometimes you peak with the inflation data and reverse a rally, but it fizzled out, and that produced those reversal candlesticks. And I told you before the week ended, I told you be watching, see if we get a reversal candlestick for the weekends. Again, it is likely we are forming a head and shoulders pattern. Very good chance that we start selling off, breaking this trend line, breaking excluding the shadows here, and start moving down towards 4,900 again. If you do that, you've got a really nice looking head and shoulders pattern. There's a strong possibility with that because now we've completed the divergences on the daily. You have the diversions complete on the 60-minute charts. Now it's done on the weekly chart. But again, as I keep saying, it's meaningless. Candle patterns are meaningless unless they're confirmed. To see confirmation of this topping tail here in the daily, we need to see confirmation of the weekly bars by the end of next week. I think you got a good shot that that's going to be the case. Many NASDAQ momentum signals have flipped to bearish. Not all of them have. Now, the blue and the red line represent momentum up and down for NASDAQ in the daily time frame here. The yellow and purple line represent the trend. And again, when you're above it, you're in an uptrend. When you're below it, you're in a downtrend. When momentum is red and you're holding above the yellow line, you're pulling back. When you drop, see the red line drop below the yellow line, momentum dropping below the trend, you get a bigger sell-off and correction or a reversal. At the topping tail on NASDAQ in the daily time frame, we're going flatline, but it has not turned to red yet. It will probably turn red Monday or Tuesday, and then we'll be watching to see if we come back to test the trend, and if we start taking it out on NASDAQ, again coming back towards this gap fill area, then again a reversal could start, and you have these little potential little miniature double top patterns in the daily time frame. So momentum not bearish here yet, likely going to happen next week. Here's the S&P 500 daily chart, and again here when we see these shifts in momentum here by these circles, again it marks turning points, and when you get bearish signals but you hold above the yellow line, it's just a pullback. When you drop below it, the red momentum comes in and it drops below the yellow, then you get a bigger sell-off, a correction, or a reversal. But these signals mark very good turning points, and again, sometimes sideways moves like here, other times you get trending moves like here, here, or here. If I bring it up close, you can see, again, here the downturn, here the upturn, and here kind of a sideways or pullback gave us kind of a sideways move, but the trend did not flip. Over here it did, and again the red line went below the yellow. Here again momentum is not yet flipped, but it's kind of going sideways. I'll be watching to see if it flips and we start moving down to this level, and then again will the trend change. We do have the gap fill here. We'll probably go back, try to fill the gap, come back up, and then probably see it end up going lower. If we eventually make our way down to this area here, for the 4,900 area, you've got the potential of the head and shoulders pattern that I think is very, very possible. In 2022, the S&P set up a head and shoulders pattern. Could see that take place again. Very common pattern. So again, momentum has not yet shifted here. I'll be watching to see if it does, but we have started to see cracks on the S&P and several momentum signals turn bearish on the NASDAQ there in the daily time frame. S&P daily here. My signals continue to remain bullish, but we're forming those negative divergences in the weekly time frame. I told you I thought we'd go up and hit that upper channel line or overthrow it. We did. Complete the divergence. Doing so, we're now forming divergences on the S&P 500 everywhere. Well, here we're in a risk-on environment. We're also seeing warning signs here. Risk-on is making a higher low here while the S&P is going higher. And then currently in our most recent price action, S&P went higher on Friday. We didn't move to a new low. So warning signs. And my signals remain bullish. The trend remains bullish here for the S&P 500. I'll be watching to see if these signals change. The divergence, which again is likely going to start playing out now, at least you got a pretty good shot that that divergence is going to start playing out. Momentum signals are starting to turn bearish. That can flip the trend signals, and we can start seeing a pretty ugly sell-off. Start to sell off here. It will need to be confirmed by moving into a risk-off environment, going up here and starting to see red as we drop and seeing the risk line turn to red here with the risk model for the S&P 500. You need to see the trend move from green to red here. So we're currently, again, seeing we still have bullish signals. We're still in a risk-on environment. The diversions that completed on Friday on the RSI daily time frame could allow the diversions in the weekly time frame to begin to play out. So we could see the signals begin to change, and we could move into a risk-off environment here. Divergences that are in place now, momentum is shifting everywhere. It's really going to show up in a lot of places. This is the S&P daily chart. Momentum is shifting now. We've turned off this trend line. You have this negative divergence. We're likely going to see red here and complete the divergence. If we follow through with the topping tail, get confirmation and a follow through next week. A lot of my indicators have divergences. Now, again, momentum is shifting in many places on my indicators. Again, S&P 500 daily again. I told you right here, I expected the S&P to go higher to reach the upper channel line or overthrow it. We ended up overthrowing it, and I told you we could redraw it. Trend lines expand and change from time to time, and I told you that channel can expand and change, and it's done that. And I addressed that. I showed you that channel weekly time frame with now our back-to-back candlesticks turning down, halting right at that expanded channel line. But I told you right here, look, we couldn't make a new high right here. We were in negative territory when we gotten back above the 50-period moving average. That's not supposed to happen, and when it does, it likely means that you're setting up a divergence, which is now forming right here. So again, we're likely going to see a reversal, and I've talked about the head and shoulders formation coming back. I didn't draw that very straight. Coming back here to the 4,900 area, I think that's a strong possibility here, and then we get a bounce back up towards this 52, 5,300 area or so. And again, you got a good shot at this pattern playing out. The neckline may not be perfect. It may be a slanted or downward sloping neckline. I think you've got a pretty good shot that this pattern could be carving out. No guarantee it does unless we see a neckline develop and a sharp sell-off. But if you start getting the sharp sell-off, then it starts increasing that probability that it could set up. But you got this divergence here suggesting that this is going to lead to a reversal. So what this is telling us is prices going higher, momentum is not buying into it. We're seeing the same thing on the weekly charts with the negative divergences everywhere.